T was 116 degrees outside when the unthinkable happened. The kind of heat where you feel the air pressing down on you, where stepping outside feels like walking into an oven. The sun was blazing so fiercely that even the asphalt looked like it was melting. Inside our small home, every window was covered. Fans were running, and the air conditioner hummed as hard as it could. But still, the heat pushed its way inside. And there was my little girl, Emily, just 8 years old, lying in bed with her favorite stuffed bunny tucked under her arm. She wasn't like other kids. She couldn't run outside in the sprinklers or play tag with her friends in the street. Emily was born with a rare condition that made it impossible for her lungs to work on their own. She depended on her ventilator 24/7. Without it, she wouldn't last more than a few minutes. Every beep, every softness of that machine was like a heartbeat to me. As long as it was running, Emily was safe. But then, without warning, it happened. The machine stopped. The rhythmic beeping that gave me peace of mind went silent. The fans that had been circulating what little cool air we had went dead, and the entire house was swallowed in pitch-black silence. At first, I froze. My brain couldn't process it. I thought maybe the machine had malfunctioned. I rushed to Emily's bedside, my hands trembling, tapping the ventilator, pressing the reset button, praying it would flicker back to life. But nothing. Panic slammed into me. Sweat that had nothing to do with the heat broke out on my forehead. This wasn't just a power outage. This was life or death. I bolted toward the breaker panel, hoping maybe it had tripped. My heart was racing, so hard it felt like it might tear out of my chest. I yanked open the metal door, scanning the switches with shaking eyes. But every breaker was fine. That's when I noticed something strange. The neighbor's porch light across the street was still on. Their fan was still spinning. Their house was still alive. This wasn't a neighborhood blackout. It was just us. I stumbled back, confusion twisting in my stomach. My mind raced. Who could have? Why would? And then I saw her, standing at the edge of our driveway, wearing oversized sunglasses and a smug little grin, was Karen. Karen, the HOA president, the woman who lived 3 houses down, the woman who had made my life miserable ever since we moved in. She hated my dog. She hated my lawn. She hated that I parked my car 2 inches over the curb. But this time she had gone too far. Beside her stood the HOA maintenance guy, holding a pair of heavy-duty cutters like he'd just performed the dirtiest job of his career. And behind them, I saw the bright orange lock they'd slapped on my power meter. I couldn't believe it. They had actually cut our electricity. For a second, my mind went blank. Then it hit me like a freight train. Emily, she was still inside, her ventilator lifeless, her tiny chest fighting for every shallow breath. I charged outside, my voice cracking with panic. Karen, what did you do? My daughter's in there. She needs her medical equipment. You can't just shut off our power. But Karen didn't flinch. She didn't apologize. She didn't even look guilty. Instead, she crossed her arms, tilted her head, and smirked like she was watching a comedy show. Her lips curled, and she said with icy calmness, "Rules are rules." For a moment, I thought I misheard her, but she went on, her voice loud enough for the maintenance guy to hear. "You were late on your HOA fees again. Maybe if you paid your dues on time, this wouldn't have to happen." I wanted to scream, to shake her, to make her understand. We weren't talking about lawn care or trash bins. This wasn't about late payments or petty neighborhood rules. This was about my daughter's life. Behind me, through the open front door, I could hear Emily wheezing. The sound was faint but sharp enough to rip my soul apart. Every second, without power, was stealing her strength. I begged. My voice cracked as I said, "Karen, please. I'll pay the fee. I'll pay double. Just turn it back on. She need that machine." But Karen just shrugged, her eyes cold. "If you can't afford to live here, maybe you shouldn't live here at all. This neighborhood isn't charity." Those words, they weren't just cruel. They were inhuman. The world around me felt like it was spinning. The sun's heat pressed harder. Sweat stung my eyes. My fists clenched at my sides. I had never felt so helpless and so angry in my entire life. And Karen? She just stood there, acting like she had won, acting like she had power over me, over my family, over Emily's very survival. But in that moment, as I looked into her smug face, I made a silent promise. She might have cut our power, but she wasn't going to break us. Not today. Not ever. Because what Karen didn't know was that I wasn't just a desperate father. I was a desperate father who was about to fight back. With everything I had, I stormed outside, my chest pounding with rage and panic. My voice cracked as I shouted, "Karen, what the hell do you think you're doing? My daughter needs that power. Her ventilator depends on it." I wasn't yelling because I was angry. Though I was furious, I was yelling because every passing second mattered. Emily was inside, fighting for breath, her tiny body depending on that machine. But Karen? She didn't flinch. She didn't look worried or guilty or even human. She just stood there, arms crossed like a queen guarding her throne, her lips curling into that smug half-smile that I'd come to know too well. And then, with a coldness that made my stomach drop, she said the words that still echo in my mind. "Rules are rules. You were late on your HOA fee again. Maybe if you paid on time, this wouldn't have to happen." I blinked, thinking maybe I misheard her. Rules? Fees? She was justifying cutting off life-saving electricity because of a 5-day late payment? Are you insane? I shouted, my voice raw. We were only late because my wife lost her job. We were going to pay this week. It's $150, Karen. $150. That's worth more than a child's life to you. But she didn't care. Not even a flicker of remorse crossed her face. She shifted her sunglasses up her nose, straightened her posture, and smirked like she was enjoying the show. "If you can't afford to live here," she said slowly, savoring every word, "maybe you should move. This neighborhood isn't charity." The way she said it, it was like a knife twisting into my chest. Behind me, to the cracked open front door, I could hear Emily's faint, raspy gasps. Each breath was weaker than the last. The heat inside the house was already unbearable, and without her ventilator pushing oxygen into her lungs, every moment was torture for her. I turned back to Karen, desperation dripping from my voice. "Please, please, I'm begging you. She's just a little girl. She has a medical condition. This isn't about charity. This is about survival. You can't do this." But Karen didn't budge. She didn't even blink. Instead, she leaned toward the maintenance worker, the poor guy holding the bolt cutters who had clearly just been following orders. She whispered something, and I swear I saw him hesitate. He looked at me, then toward my house, then back at her, like maybe, just maybe, he realized how wrong this was. But Karen jabbed her finger toward me and hissed, "Don't listen to him. He's just trying to get out of paying. If we let him slide, the whole neighborhood will think they can get away with it. We have rules for a reason." Her voice carried like poison. And now, a couple of neighbors who had been peeking out from behind curtains or standing on their lawn started inching closer, curious. They whispered to each other, their eyes darting between Karen and me. I wanted to scream at them too. "Can't you see what's happening? Can't you see my daughter's life is on the line?" But all I could focus on was Emily. Every tick of the clock was another second of air she wasn't getting. "Karen," I said, my voice breaking this time, "you don't understand. The ventilator doesn't just help her sleep. It keeps her alive. If she doesn't get that power back, she could..." I couldn't even finish the sentence. My throat locked up. The image of Emily's chest going still flashed in my mind, and for a terrifying moment, I thought I might collapse right there on the pavement. But Karen? She wasn't moved. She was unmoved, untouched, unshaken. She just tilted her head and said, almost mockingly, "Maybe you should have thought about that before ignoring your dues. This isn't my problem. This is yours." It was like arguing with a wall, except this wall had teeth and claws and enjoyed watching you suffer. I clenched my fists so tight my nails dug into my palms. For the first time in my life, I thought I might actually lose control. But I couldn't afford to waste energy on rage. I had to think fast. Inside, Emily's faint cries drifted out, each one cutting me open. And that's when it hit me. Karen wasn't just cruel. She wasn't just following rules. No, she was punishing me. She'd been looking for a reason to break me ever since the day we moved in. She hated my family, hated that we didn't bow to her every ridiculous HOA demand. This wasn't about money. This was about power. Her power. But what she didn't realize was this. When you threaten a father's child, when you put their life on the line, you cross a line you can never uncross. I stepped closer, so close I could see my reflection in her sunglasses. My voice was low, shaking, but every word carried fire. If my daughter dies because of this, that's on you. And trust me, Karen, you'll never live it down. For the first time, her smirk wavered. Just a flicker. But then, like flipping a switch, she plastered it back on and turned her head away. Meanwhile, I could feel the heat radiating off the asphalt, the sweat dripping down my face, the panic clawing at my chest. Time was running out. Emily was running out. And as much as I hated Karen in that moment, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to stand by and let my little girl become a casualty of some HOA rule. Not while I still had breath in my body, I rushed back inside, my heart hammering so loudly it drowned out the silence of the powerless house. Emily's tiny chest was rising and falling with uneven gasps, each one weaker than the last. My hands shook as I grabbed the backup battery for the ventilator, snapping it into place and praying it would work. The machine came back to life with a weak hum, and I felt a wave of relief. Brief, but not nearly enough, because I knew the truth. This battery would only last 2 hours at most. 2 hours until Emily was in danger again. 2 hours until her body gave out. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911 with trembling fingers. The operator's calm voice answered, but I couldn't hide the panic in mine. Please, you need to send help. My daughter relies on medical equipment to breathe, and my HOA president just had my power cut. She's in danger. She'll die without electricity. There was silence on the line for a beat. Then the dispatcher's voice grew urgent. Sir, cutting off electricity to essential medical equipment is extremely dangerous. Stay calm. We're dispatching emergency services right now. Help is on the way. Hearing those words gave me a sliver of hope, but as I hung up, reality came crashing back. Help might be coming, but time was slipping through my fingers. I bolted back outside, sweat dripping down my temples in the blistering heat. Karen was still there, lounging like it was just another sunny afternoon. She was sipping her iced tea through a straw, sunglasses perched on her nose, acting as if my daughter's fight for survival was nothing more than neighborhood drama. My voice broke as I begged, Karen, please just turn the power back on. The ambulance is coming, but she won't make it if we wait that long. But Karen didn't budge. She tilted her head, took another long sip of her drink, and smirked like I was performing for her amusement. Around us, neighbors had begun to gather. Some peered from behind curtains. Others stepped cautiously onto their lawns, murmuring to each other. The whispers carried through the air like wildfire. They weren't just watching. They were judging, trying to figure out what was really happening. I turned toward them, desperation clawing at me. I shouted with everything in me, my voice echoing down the street. If my daughter dies because of this, it'll be on Karen's hands. Gasps rippled through the crowd. People exchanged shocked glances. Some pulled out their phones to record. For once, Karen wasn't the one in control of the narrative. Her cruelty was now on display for the whole neighborhood. And then, cutting through the murmurs, came the deep, commanding voice of my neighbor Tom. Tom was a retired veteran, a man who had spent decades in service to this country. He was tough, respected, and not the type to stand by when injustice was happening. He pushed his way to the front, his weathered face twisted with fury, and pointed straight at Karen. This is abuse of power, Karen, he thundered. You don't cut off medical equipment, no matter what. That's not enforcing rules. That's endangering a child's life. The crowd hushed instantly. Tom's voice carried authority that even Karen couldn't ignore. For the first time, I saw her composure falter. Her smirk twitched, her hand tightened around her glass. She tried to roll her eyes, muttering, "Oh, please, you're all overreacting." But it was too late. The tide was turning. Neighbors who were once afraid to speak up against Karen were now whispering words like unbelievable, heartless, and she went too far this time. A few even moved closer to me, offering quiet words of support. Karen's smug armor was starting to crack. Her sunglasses couldn't hide the flicker of nervousness in her expression. For years she had ruled this neighborhood through fear and intimidation. But now, with an innocent child's life hanging in the balance and half the community watching, her power was slipping. I locked eyes with her and said firmly, so everyone could hear, "You wanted to make this about rules, Karen, but this isn't about rules anymore. This is about life and death, and everyone here knows it." For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw something in her face I never thought I'd see: hesitation. She knew she was losing control, and deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before a cruel game collapsed completely. IT didn't take long, maybe 5-10 minutes at most, but in that short span of time, it felt like I was living through hours of pure hell. And then, suddenly, the wail of sirens pierced the suffocating heat. 2 police cars screeched to a stop at the curb, lights flashing red and blue across the houses. Right behind them, an ambulance pulled in, its back doors swinging open as paramedics jumped out, rushing toward my front door with medical bags in hand. The crowd of neighbors parted like a wave, gasps and murmurs following the scene. Phones were up everywhere now. Half the neighborhood was recording. The paramedics didn't waste a second. They stormed inside, and I followed close behind. The sight of them kneeling by Emily's bedside nearly broke me. One paramedic gently placed an oxygen mask over her tiny face, while another checked her vitals, speaking quickly in clipped medical terms. "She's stable for now," one of them told me, though his eyes betrayed his concern. But she wouldn't have lasted much longer without intervention. Relief washed over me, but it was laced with fury. Because while they were saving Emily inside, outside, the cause of this nightmare was still standing with a smug grin on her face. When I stepped back out, the officers were already questioning me. They listened carefully as I explained what Karen had done, how she had ordered the power cut despite knowing about Emily's condition. I could see their jaws tightening, their eyes narrowing with each word. Then, one officer turned on his heel and marched straight toward Karen. His boots hit the pavement with sharp authority, and the crowd grew silent, waiting. "Ma'am," the officer said firmly, "did you authorize the disconnection of power to this home?" Karen didn't hesitate. She crossed her arms, lifted her chin, and smirked like she was still in charge. "Yes, they broke HOA rules. That's my authority." The officer's face turned red. His jaw clenched so tightly I thought his teeth might crack. He leaned in, his voice cutting like a blade. "No, ma'am. You do not have the legal right to endanger a child's life. What you did today is reckless endangerment." The smugness vanished from Karen's face like a light being switched off. Her smirk wavered. Her sunglasses slipped slightly down her nose, and for the first time all day, she looked caught. The crowd erupted with murmurs, neighbors whispering things like, "Finally," and "She's getting what she deserves." Phones zoomed in, capturing every flicker of panic on her face. Karen stammered, I was just following the rules. I didn't know." But the officer cut her off sharply. "You knew. You were told. And you ignored it. That's not rules. That's negligence." The other officer pointed to the maintenance worker who had helped cut the power, restore the electricity. "Now." The man hesitated, glancing nervously at Karen as if waiting for her permission. But the officer stepped closer, his voice dropping to a growl. "If you don't, you'll be facing charges too." That was all it took. The worker scrambled toward the meter, fumbling with his tools. A tense moment passed, then, click. Within minutes, the lights inside my house flickered back on. Through the doorway, I heard the steady hum of Emily's ventilator roaring back to life. The sound was like music, like the heartbeat of hope itself returning to our home. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding, my knees nearly giving out from the relief. Emily was safe again, for now. But outside, justice was just beginning. The first officer stepped forward, pulling out his handcuffs. The metallic click echoed across the silent street as he said, "Karen, you are under arrest for reckless endangerment." The color drained from her face. What? No. You can't arrest me. I'm the HOA president. The officer didn't even flinch. Lady, I don't care if you're the Queen of England. You cross a line. Gasps rippled through the crowd, followed by cheers from a few braver neighbors. Phones tilted, zooming in, capturing every moment as the officer pulled Karen's hands behind her back and secured the cuffs. Her iced tea slipped from her grip, crashing onto the sidewalk, shattering into pieces that sparkled in the sun. The image couldn't have been more symbolic. Her power, her arrogance, her untouchable image, shattered for everyone to see. As the officers guided her toward the police car, her protests grew weaker. This is a mistake. I was only doing my job. But no one believed her anymore. The neighbors watched silently, some shaking their heads, others smirking with satisfaction. For years, Karen had ruled over them with an iron fist, wielding the HOA rules like weapons. But today she met a power greater than hers. And as the squad car door slammed shut, I realized something. Justice wasn't just served for me and Emily. It was served for the whole neighborhood. Because everyone had just seen the truth. Karen wasn't powerful. She was reckless. And now, she was paying the price. That day changed everything. Up until then, Karen had been untouchable. She strutted through the neighborhood with her clipboard, handing out fines, sending threatening letters, and acting like she owned every square foot of property around her. Most people grumbled but obeyed. They were too afraid to stand up to her, worried about what new punishment she might invent. But all it took was one act of cruelty too far, cutting the power to a child's medical equipment, for her entire empire to collapse. Within a week, Karen was officially removed from her position as HOA president. The HOA board had no choice. Between the police reports, the videos neighbors had posted online, and the outrage spreading to the community, keeping her in power would have been impossible. And it didn't stop there. She faced criminal charges for reckless endangerment of a disabled child. Her smug smile and arrogant speeches had been replaced with court dates, lawyers, and the cold reality that her title didn't make her invincible. As for Emily, she pulled through, thanks to the paramedics, the police, and the neighbors who stepped up in that moment. She was stabilized and given the care she needed. When I walked into her room later that night and saw her sleeping peacefully again, the ventilator humming beside her, tears streamed down my face. Relief, gratitude, exhaustion. It all hit me at once. But make no mistake, the trauma of almost losing her will never leave me. Every time I hear the beep of her machine now, I think about how quickly it can go silent. Every time the power flickers during a storm, I feel a surge of panic, remembering that awful moment when the house went dark. That day taught me just how fragile life can be. Later, one of the officers pulled me aside. He looked me straight in the eyes and said, "No HOA has a right to interfere with medical equipment. That's a line they can't cross." What she did today wasn't just wrong, it was criminal. And he was right. For years, Karen had hidden behind the phrase, "rules are rules." She used it to justify her pettiness, her bullying, her abuse of power. But rules mean nothing when they strip away basic humanity. When people start valuing fines and fees over human lives, they've lost all sense of what really matters. That was Karen's downfall. She thought she was untouchable because of her position. She thought hiding behind the HOA gave her the power to do whatever she wanted. But when she crossed the line, when she endangered a child, she destroyed herself. And the neighborhood saw it. People who had once been silent finally spoke up. Some apologized to me later, saying, "We should have stood up to her sooner." Others admitted they were scared. But seeing her in handcuffs gave them hope. Hope that bullies like her don't always win.so. To anyone listening right now, protect your loved ones. Because at the end of the day, no HOA, no title. No neighbor has the right to make you choose between following their petty rules and keeping your family safe. Stand up against bullies, no matter their position. Whether they're hiding behind a uniform, a clipboard, or a fancy title. Their authority means nothing when they use it to hurt others. And never forget, sometimes it only takes one act of courage to change everything. One phone call to 911. One neighbor like Tom willing to step forward. One video recording that exposes the truth. Those moments matter. They are the cracks in the armor of people who think they're invincible. Karen thought she was the most powerful person in the neighborhood, but in the end, she was powerless against the truth, powerless against justice, and powerless against a community that finally refused to stay silent. So remember this. Bullies only win when good people do nothing. And on that scorching hot day, when my daughter's life was hanging by a thread, good people stepped up. The paramedics, the police, my neighbors, even strangers online who shared our story. Together, they made sure justice was served. And that's why I'll never stop telling this story. Because it's not just about my daughter or about me. It's about reminding everyone that no matter how hopeless things seem, you are never truly alone. One act of courage can bring even the worst HOA tyrants to justice.